My daughter didn't invite me to her graduation until it was 3 hours to the event, so I didn't show up. She later sent me a text message accusing me of never loving her and never being there for her. What happened next was rather unexpected. I will tell you how everything unfolded. First, let me quickly thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today's special shout out goes to Roy Hudson from Ottawa. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's go deeper into the story. I'm not the perfect parent. Let me start there, before anyone gets the wrong idea. I've made my share of mistakes, said things I shouldn't have, worked too many late nights when she was younger just to keep the lights on. But if there's one thing I never wavered on, it was loving my daughter. Her name's Amara. Bright, sharp-tongued, independent to a fault. She's the kind of young woman who walks into a room and makes people turn their heads, not because of beauty alone, but because of this energy she carries, like she already knows what you're about to say and probably thinks it's stupid. She gets that from her mother. But that heart, the soft part underneath all that armor, that came from me. Or at least, I used to believe it did. I work in accounting, nothing glamorous, but solid. Numbers make sense when people don't. For the last 20 years, every dime I didn't spend on bills went to her. School trips, textbooks, sneakers she just had to have even when I couldn't justify it. I gave up vacations, nights out, hobbies, all the noise of a personal life, for one purpose, to see her do better than I did. That was the agreement, even if it was unspoken. I provide, you thrive. And thrive she did. Honor roll, debate team, early admission into her dream college. I watched her grow up like a flower pushing through concrete, strong and proud. And though things got tense between us once she hit 16, I thought that was normal. Teenagers pull away, test the boundaries. I never thought she'd draw a line and leave me on the other side of it. Graduation was coming up. I had it marked in my head for months, even without a formal invite. It was the one milestone I'd fantasized about since she was small, seeing her cross that stage, hearing her name echo in the auditorium, clapping so hard my hands stung. I imagined bringing flowers, maybe crying a little. I'd already picked out the shirt I wanted to wear. It was childish, I know, but I even practiced what I'd say to her after. I'm proud of you, kid. You made it. I pictured her smiling at me like she used to when she'd run to me after school, all braces and breathless excitement. I didn't think it was too much to hope for. Then, nothing. No invite. No mention of it. As the weeks crept closer, I kept waiting. Thought maybe I missed a text. Checked my phone so often I memorized the wallpaper. Still nothing. At first, I rationalized. Maybe it's digital this year. Maybe she assumed I knew the date. Maybe she was just busy. But the truth started seeping in like water under a closed door. Everyone else had been invited. Her mother's side of the family, her godparents, even her high school friends. I found out through a distant cousin who called to ask if I'd be bringing a +1. That was when my stomach turned. I waited, still holding on to the tiniest scrap of hope. Maybe she had a reason. Maybe it was an oversight, some logistical mix-up. But the more I sat with it, the more bitter it tasted. And then, 3 hours before the ceremony, a text buzzed in. Hey, graduation's at 3 p.m. today. Just figured I'd let you know. That was it. No address, no ticket link, no hope you can make it. Just a flat, casual note like I was some afterthought. Like she was inviting me to a garage sale. I stared at the message for a good 10 minutes, reading it over and over, wondering what in God's name I had done to deserve that kind of disrespect. I felt my throat tighten, a flush creeping up my neck. I hadn't cried in years, but I came close that day. 3 hours. That was all the consideration I got after 2 decades of sacrifice. I didn't respond. Not then. I sat on the edge of my bed, the same one she used to climb into when she had nightmares, and tried to make sense of what I was feeling. Shame, hurt, anger. It was all tangled together. My pride screamed at me not to go. Not like this. Not as an afterthought. But another part of me, some stubborn, wounded piece, wanted to show up anyway, if only to prove I cared. That maybe, just maybe, she'd see me there and realize I deserved better. But in the end, I didn't go. I couldn't. Walking into that auditorium, knowing everyone else had been chosen, planned for, wanted, It would have broken something in me that I couldn't afford to lose. Dignity matters, even when it costs you the thing you want most. So I stayed home. I sat on the couch in that god-awful silence, the kind that only loneliness knows how to make. And when 3 p.m. rolled around, I checked the time, whispered congratulations to no one in particular, and poured myself a drink. People always say family is unconditional, that blood is thicker than water. But they forget to mention how sometimes blood can choke you. It can squeeze the air out of your chest when someone you raised, someone you loved, treats you like a footnote. And the cruelest part? You're not allowed to be angry about it. Not without being labeled bitter or petty or emotionally unavailable. But I was angry, and I had every damn right to be. Still, I said nothing. Just sat there as the hours ticked by. She never followed up, never asked if I was coming, never checked in afterward. For all I knew, she hadn't even noticed I wasn't there. And maybe that was the real gut punch, not the invite, but the indifference that followed it. It was exactly 11:58 a.m. when her message came through, and I know that because I looked at the clock the moment I read it, like my brain was trying to prove how ridiculous it all was. 3 hours. She gave me 3 hours to show up for what was supposed to be one of the most important days of her life and mine. I sat there, my phone still in my hand, blinking like it might produce a second message. Maybe she'd follow it with an apology, maybe some explanation. Sorry, this is last minute. I've been overwhelmed. Something. Anything. But that bubble stayed empty. No typing dots. No second thought. I don't know how long I sat there in that chair, just staring at the screen. Long enough for my coffee to go cold. Long enough for my heartbeat to settle from its first shocked spike into something heavier, resentment. Maybe. I wish I could say I felt numb, but that would have been easier. What I actually felt was stupid. Just completely and utterly played. And I hated that. Hated feeling like the needy one, the forgotten one. Parents aren't supposed to admit when their kids hurt them. We're supposed to take it, keep giving, keep sacrificing, and tell ourselves that love is enough. But in that moment, love didn't feel like enough. It felt like a bruise she didn't even know she was pressing on. I thought about what it would look like if I did go. I imagined walking into that auditorium with the rest of her people already seated, maybe even dressed in coordinated outfits, the way some families do. Me, alone, sliding in at the last minute. No seat saved, no one waving me down. I imagined clapping with strangers, pretending I wasn't an afterthought, pretending I hadn't just been invited out of obligation. I imagined her walking across that stage, eyes scanning the crowd, and not even looking for me. And that's when I knew I couldn't do it. Not because I was petty, not because I wanted to punish her, but because I refused to shrink myself into someone who begged for scraps of love. I stood up, walked into my bedroom, and closed the door like I was trying to shut the whole damn world out. I sat on the edge of the bed, fingers digging into my knees, and let the silence roll over me. I thought of all the years I showed up without being asked. Parent-teacher conferences, soccer games she barely played in, school plays where she had one line, but I clapped like she won a Tony. I remembered the nights she'd cry over friend drama, curled up on the couch with her head in my lap, asking me if she was hard to love. And every time, I said the same thing, no, baby, you're everything. I gave her everything. And now, I was an optional guest in her success. Around 12:30, my sister Joy called. She lives 2 states away and barely speaks to Amara, but somehow even she had received an invite weeks ago. I almost didn't answer, but I needed to hear someone else's voice, someone who knew who I used to be before this disappointment settled into my bones. Hey, she said softly, you getting ready? I hesitated. Did you get an invite too? Yeah. Came through Amara's group email last month. Why? She just told me today. Sent a text an hour ago. Joy was silent for a long time. I could hear her breathing on the line, the weight of that revelation pressing down on her too. Oh, damn, she finally said. I don't even know what to say. You don't have to, I muttered. It says it all. Joy didn't try to justify it. She didn't tell me to be the bigger person. She just said, I'm sorry. That's cold. It was. And hearing someone else say it, acknowledge it, helped more than I expected. We talked for a few more minutes, mostly small things. Her kids, work, her husband's new obsession with grilling ribs. But when we hung up, that silence returned, heavier than before. Now it had confirmation. At 2:45, I turned off my phone. I didn't want to see pictures. Didn't want to get tagged in posts by people who assumed I'd been there. I walked into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of whiskey even though it was too early for that, and sat by the window. I watched a group of teenagers ride bikes down the street, their laughter echoing in the summer air. One of them looked like Amara at 13, legs too long for her body, hair tied up in the same messy bun she used to wear when she was pretending to hate the world. And I felt the tears rise then. Not because I missed her, but because I missed who we used to be. Back when love was simple. Back when a scraped knee or a bad dream was the worst thing that could happen. Back when I was still her hero. Time crawled by. At some point, I realized the ceremony must have started. I wondered if her name had been called already. If the crowd clapped. If someone else was filming it for her. I wondered if she even noticed I wasn't there, or worse, if she did and didn't care. I thought about texting her. Just one message. Something like, "Hope it went well. Proud of you." But then I remembered her tone in that last message. Distant. Dismissive. Like I was nothing more than a box to check. And that pride I had managed to scrape together, I wasn't going to throw it away for a one-sided reunion. By the time 4 p.m. came around, I had finished 2 glasses of whiskey and said congratulations aloud to an empty room. It felt pathetic, but it also felt like closure. That night, I left my phone off. I turned off all the lights and let myself sit in the dark, thinking about the version of my life where she had sent me that invite a month ago. Where we'd taken pictures after. Where we laughed and hugged and ate overpriced chicken at some restaurant with linen napkins. That version never came, and I was done begging for it. The text came in the next morning. I hadn't turned my phone back on until after I'd brewed coffee. Black, no sugar, just the way I always drink it when I need to feel something. I was still nursing the dull hangover of disappointment, and truthfully, I wasn't expecting anything. I figured the silence would stretch for days, maybe weeks. But there it was, flashing across my lock screen like a slap, a message from Amara. Not a thank you. Not a soft olive branch. Not even a shallow photo from graduation. Just cold, surgical words that cut deep and quick. You didn't even show up. I knew it. You never really loved me. You were never there for me. Not really. I read it once. Then again. My hand started to shake, and I had to set the phone down before I dropped it. There's a particular kind of pain that comes when your own child questions your love, a pain I wouldn't wish on anyone. It's different from betrayal by a friend, or a lover, or even a sibling. It's the pain of hearing the one person you would have bled for erase every sacrifice with a single sentence. I sat down at the kitchen table, the chair cold beneath me, the room silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. I don't know how long I stared at the wall before finally picking the phone back up. I wanted to scream. I wanted to write something venomous, something that would make her regret every syllable. But I didn't. I took a breath. I read her message again. And then I typed slowly, deliberately. You told me about your graduation 3 hours before it started, Amara. Everyone else had known for a month. I found out through a cousin. I didn't show up because I was hurt, not because I didn't love you. I hit send before I could overthink it. My thumb hovered, waiting for a response, knowing full well what kind of reply I might get. I hoped for a pause, a hesitation, some hint of remorse. But when her reply came, it was immediate, and it was worse than the first. So, your feelings don't matter. You should have been there anyway. That's what a real parent does. I didn't cry. Not then. Not when I read those words. Instead, something inside me just broke. Quietly. Like the soft crack of wood under pressure. There was no shouting, no thrown phone, no slammed fists. Just a sudden, unmistakable shift. I'd never felt so invisible in my own child's eyes. So irrelevant. I could have vanished right then and there, and it would have made no difference to her. My presence, my love, was negotiable. Conditional. Dismissible. That was the moment. Not the late invite. Not the cold ceremony I never attended. That was the moment I knew I had to stop pretending things were okay. I had spent years swallowing my hurt, making excuses for her, believing that someday she'd come around and see everything I'd done out of love. But I wasn't a doormat. I wasn't a bank account with a heartbeat. I was her parent, and I had been there, whether she wanted to acknowledge it or not. I didn't text her back. I needed air. I grabbed my keys, threw on a hoodie, and left the apartment. Walked 2 miles to nowhere, just trying to outpace the rage and sadness that swirled in my chest like a storm. I ended up at a small park, the kind with worn benches and cracked pavement, and just sat there for a while watching a little boy chase pigeons. His mother laughed, clapping gently every time he got close. And I thought, that was me once. That was us. I used to laugh like that with Amara, hold her tiny hand while she stomped through puddles. I used to be her world. When I finally got back home, the silence felt different. It wasn't lonely, it was clear. I sat down and thought about every time she'd called me just to ask for money. Rent, groceries, a broken phone. I had given without question, without lecture, without guilt, tripping her like my own parents used to do to me. And not once had she said, "Thank you, Dad. I appreciate you." Somewhere along the line, I had stopped being her father and started being her fallback plan. So I made a decision. Not out of spite, out of necessity. I was done. No more emotional availability without respect. No more guilt-laced giving. No more waiting for her to see my worth. The very next week, she called. I remember the ring, one long buzz that lit up her name on the screen. I stared at it, didn't answer. A minute later, a text. "I need help with rent this month. Can you send me $300? No apology. No acknowledgement. No shift in tone. Just straight back to business, like our last conversation hadn't scorched the earth between us. So I replied with just one line. Ask the people who've always been there for you. The silence that followed wasn't satisfying. It wasn't vindicating. It was just necessary. I put the phone down, and this time, I didn't wait for a reply. Later that night, Joy called again. She'd heard about the graduation drama through the grapevine. Family chat threads, whispers from relatives who were always eager to weigh in without knowing the full story. I told her everything. The texts, the fallout, the line Amara had crossed. Jesus, Joy said, after I read the messages aloud. She really said that? That your feelings don't matter? Verbatim. There was a pause. Then she added, that's not just immature. That's cruel. I didn't argue. I just nodded, even though she couldn't see me. I was tired of arguing with myself about whether I had done enough. I had. And I was finally, painfully learning that love without boundaries wasn't love. It was self-erasure. There's a point where love stops sounding like grace and starts sounding like weakness. That point came for me not with a scream, not with some drawn-out confrontation, but with a single text message asking for rent money, like nothing had happened, like I was just some ATM with old feelings. I didn't flinch when I wrote that line. Ask the people who've always been there for you. I meant it. I meant every syllable. But after I sent it, I sat there for a long while, watching the screen stay blank, knowing what that silence really meant. I had finally drawn a line she didn't think I was capable of drawing. And maybe she never expected me to. It was strange how clear my mind became after that. I wasn't caught in the loop anymore. No more mentally replaying our last conversation. No more trying to understand how we got from bedtime stories and science fairs to accusations of lovelessness. I had accepted something most parents refuse to swallow. Sometimes your child doesn't see you. Not really. Not past their own need, their own filtered version of the past. And if you keep trying to convince them, you'll lose yourself in the process. She didn't respond that day. Not the next either. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel the urge to chase her down or explain myself. I'd spent too many years cushioning her falls, softening the truth so she wouldn't have to feel the weight of consequence. But this time, I let it land. I let the silence speak for me. About a week later, I got a phone call from Lisa, Amara's godmother. We hadn't spoken in a while, but she was always one of those middle ground voices, someone who meant well even when she didn't fully understand the depth of what was going on. Hey, she said, cautiously. I wanted to check in. I could already tell where this was going. I kept my tone even. I heard Amara's been struggling. She said you refused to help her. She didn't say why, just that you turned your back on her. I laughed, short and bitter. Turn my back? Is that what we're calling it now? Lisa hesitated. I'm not picking sides, then don't call it that, I snapped. Because turning my back would have been disappearing when she needed me most. I've done nothing but be there, Lisa. She gave me 3 hours notice for her graduation. 3. Everyone else had a month. She told me I didn't matter. And when I didn't show, She accused me of never loving her. Lisa fell silent. She said my feelings didn't matter. I added, quieter now. And then she asked for rent money a week later. No apology. No acknowledgement. I could hear Lisa exhale slowly. I'm sorry. I didn't know it was that deep. It always is, I muttered. It always has been. Lisa eventually offered some tepid attempt at peacekeeping. Something about giving her time, about how young people sometimes lash out when they're hurting. But I wasn't interested in parenting grown emotions at the expense of my own. Not anymore. After that call, the gossip trickled in like a leaky faucet. A cousin tagged me in a photo from the graduation reception. I ignored it. An old family friend messaged me privately, asking if Amara and I were okay because she seemed a little tense that day. I deleted the message. The problem wasn't that people noticed something was wrong. The problem was that no one wanted to ask Amara the hard questions. No one dared. It was easier to paint me as distant, cold, unforgiving. Because that version let them keep loving her without having to confront the version of her that weaponized guilt. 2 weeks after the last message, I received another text from Amara. I still don't understand why you're doing this. You're punishing me for being overwhelmed. You always made things about you. That's when I realized the entire situation wasn't about what I had done or hadn't done. It was about what she believed. It was about the narrative she had built in her mind, that I had somehow failed her emotionally even when I was there physically and financially. That I hadn't loved her the way she wanted to be loved, so the way I had loved her didn't count. And that's the most dangerous part about parenting. No matter how much you give, your child may still decide it wasn't enough. I didn't respond to that message. Not because I didn't have words, but because I had too many, and none of them would have mattered. Not to someone who'd already decided her version of the truth. A few days later, I sat with Joy on her porch while her kids played in the yard. I hadn't told her everything yet, but she had heard enough through the family threads to piece it together. You know, she said, sipping her iced tea, she's probably telling people you abandoned her. I know. Joy looked at me carefully. And you're okay with that? I paused. The wind stirred the leaves, and in the distance, her son let out a shriek of laughter. No, I admitted. But I'd rather be the villain in her story than the doormat in my own. Joy gave a slow nod. You've always been her safety net. You finally pulled it away. I didn't pull it away, I said quietly. She cut through it. I just stepped back. That's when I realized something else, something sharper than all the rest. Every time I tried to protect her from consequences, I had been protecting myself from guilt. Every time I said yes to her demands, I was saying no to my own boundaries. And I wasn't going to live like that anymore. She didn't reach out again, and I didn't chase her. For the first time in our relationship, the silence wasn't just avoidance. It was a choice, a boundary, a declaration. The ripple didn't hit all at once. That's the thing about family gossip. It's slow, almost stealthy at first. A comment here, a glance there. It starts like an itch you can't quite reach, and then before you know it, it's a full-blown rash. The first real sign was a Facebook post. Not from Amara, but from her mother. A vague little status with just enough venom to stir sympathy and just enough ambiguity to avoid direct confrontation. Some people only show up when it benefits them. Others are there until the work is done. Then they vanish. Shameful. No names, no tags. But I knew who it was meant for. I wasn't naive. And neither were the 5 people who commented within an hour with those maddeningly complicit replies. You did everything you could. They'll regret it one day. Keep your head up, sis. I didn't comment. Didn't like the post. Didn't even call her. What was the point? Amara's mother and I hadn't seen eye to eye since the ink dried on our custody agreement. She was always more performative, more concerned with how things looked than how they really were. And now she had a narrative that fit her taste. She was the ever-present mother, the emotional savior, while I had become the absentee dad who couldn't even show up for graduation. It was a lie wrapped in just enough truth to be dangerous. But I stayed quiet. Because silence is sometimes the only dignity you have left when your reputation becomes community currency. Then came the voicemail. I still remember the timestamp, Wednesday, 8:07 p.m. I was on the couch, eating dinner in front of the TV like I often did these days, when the notification blinked across my phone. It was from Aunt Regina, my mother's oldest sister, family matriarch. The unofficial ambassador of fixing things. Hey, baby. Her voice crackled through my speaker, soft but edged with disapproval. I don't like being in the middle of all this, but Amara came by yesterday. She looked upset, told me y'all weren't speaking. I told her to reach out, but she said you've cut her off completely. What's going on? She paused. Then came the part that landed hardest. I know you've always been a good father, but sometimes pride keeps us from doing the right thing. Don't let that happen here. Pride. That word chewed at me for days. People throw it around like it's some dirty little secret you're supposed to outgrow once you have kids. But they never ask what happens when your child confuses pride with boundaries, when protecting yourself becomes the only act of parenting you have left. Still, her message left a splinter. Aunt Regina wasn't malicious. She was old school. The kind of woman who believes family loyalty trumps everything else, including disrespect. But she hadn't seen the texts. She hadn't seen how easily Amara weaponized guilt, how casually she dismissed my feelings, how she reached for my wallet before my voice. That's not pride. That's self-preservation. I thought about calling Regina back, explaining it all, reading the messages aloud like receipts. But what would that prove? People believe what they want to believe, and most of them had already decided I was wrong the moment I didn't show up. So I kept to myself. I spent the next weekend cleaning out the hall closet, trying to stay busy. That's when I found the box. An old, beat-up shoebox with Amara scribbled in Sharpie on the lid. I almost didn't open it. But curiosity's a cruel little thing. Inside were 2 decades of forgotten things. Her 3rd grade spelling bee certificate. A crumpled drawing of me with a cape that said, "Super Dad." A note she wrote in 6th grade for Father's Day. "Thank you for always picking me up, even when I fall for dumb stuff. I love you forever." I sat on the floor and held that note for what felt like an hour. And then I cried. I cried not because I missed her, but because I missed the version of her that believed that. I missed being seen, respected, loved without conditions. By the time the tears dried, something else settled in, resolve. I couldn't keep mourning someone who was still alive. I had to let go of the fantasy that she'd come around, apologize, see me fully. That version of her might come one day, or it might not. But until then, I owed it to myself to live in the truth. A few days later, I ran into Darnell, a tenant from a property I used to manage. He'd always been nosy in a friendly, familiar way, half tenant, half neighborhood uncle. "Hey, big man," he called out as I was coming out of the convenience store. "You good?" "Yeah," I nodded. "Hanging in there." He gave me a look, one of those you can lie to everyone else but not me looks. Then he said, "Heard about your girl." People talking. I didn't ask what they were saying. Didn't need to. "I know what it looks like," I said. "I don't care what it looks like," he cut in. "I seen you, man. Seen you bring that girl lunch when she forgot it. Watched you sit through them boring recitals. You ain't never missed a beat." Don't let folks rewrite your story 'cause they weren't paying attention the first time. I felt something heavy lift in my chest. It wasn't validation, exactly, it was recognition. And sometimes, that's all we really need. For someone to say, "I saw you. I know you." That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. I still didn't unblock her. Still didn't respond. I wasn't angry anymore. Just done. There's a difference. Anger burns fast and leaves you exhausted. Being done is quiet. It's peace with a locked door. Some distances aren't measured in miles, they're measured in silences. In the unanswered texts. The unchecked voicemails. The birthdays that pass like ordinary Tuesdays. I didn't wake up one morning and decide to stop loving my daughter. That would have been easier. Cleaner. No, what happened was slower. A shedding, like skin after a sunburn, flaky at first, then all at once. I didn't lose love. I lost access. And when you lose access to someone's honesty, their respect, their ability to see you clearly, you have no choice but to step back. 3 months passed. No word from Amara. No updates from mutual family. I had unmuted her on social media just to remind myself I wasn't hiding, but she never posted anything. Nothing public, at least. Just a digital void where a daughter used to be. And me? I lived. I read more. Took walks again. Cooked meals that didn't involve frozen anything. I even started therapy, something I never thought I'd do, because if you live long enough as a parent, the heartbreak has to go somewhere. Therapy made me confront truths I had spent years burying under good intentions. Like how I had been overcompensating for not being with her mother. Or how I let guilt control my parenting more than guidance ever did. How every time I gave in to a demand I couldn't afford, it was less about her and more about keeping her close. Turns out, loving someone desperately doesn't guarantee they'll interpret it that way. Sometimes they just see the transactions. And when the love stops being convenient, they rewrite the story. It was around Christmas when I finally wrote the letter. Not to send, just to write. Something about putting it on paper made the pain feel less like a wound and more like a scar. I sat at the kitchen table with a glass of water, pen in hand, and started from the beginning. Dear Amara, you were born on a cold morning in March. I remember because the nurse said something about how you came into the world with a scowl, like you were already disappointed by it. But the moment I held you, none of it mattered. You were mine. I was yours. And I made a promise, silent, but firm, that I would give you everything I could. And I did. Sometimes too much. Sometimes the wrong things. But I gave. And I showed up. The letter went on for 4 pages. I talked about the quiet moments, watching cartoons in our old apartment, eating cereal for dinner when money was tight, braiding her hair with clumsy fingers that always got stuck. I didn't defend myself. I didn't argue. I just told my truth. That love is not always visible in the ways we want it to be, but that doesn't make it any less real. That showing up isn't about grand gestures, it's about consistency. And that I'm not perfect, but I never stopped loving her. I sealed the letter, wrote her name on the envelope, and placed it in the back of my drawer. I never mailed it, because love doesn't always need an audience. And some truths are only meant to be told once, when you're ready, and when they might finally be heard. In February, I ran into Marissa, one of Amara's old high school friends. She worked at the bookstore I wandered into on a whim, looking for a gift for a coworker. We made small talk, the way people do when they're surprised by a familiar face, and just as I was about to leave, she said it. She talks about you, you know. I turned. What? Amara. She mentions you. Mostly when she's mad. But sometimes it's not angry. Sometimes it's sad. I didn't say anything. She told me once, Marissa continued, that you used to make her feel like the safest person in the room, and that she hated how easy it was to lose that. I nodded. I didn't trust my voice. As I walked out of the store, I felt the old ache rise up again, but it wasn't bitter anymore. Just familiar, like an old injury that throbs before it rains. And I realized then that I didn't hate her. I never could, but I also didn't owe her my peace. A month later, I got another message. The first in a long time. Hey, just wanted you to know I'm okay. I've been thinking. I hope you're okay too. No demands. No apologies either. Just a pulse. I didn't reply. Not because I was angry, but because I was healing. And sometimes, silence isn't rejection, it's preservation. Maybe one day we'll talk. Maybe not. I've stopped trying to script the ending. I know where I stand now. I know what I gave. And I know what I can't give anymore. My love for her never ended. But my tolerance for disrespect did. That's the part people don't understand. Setting boundaries with your child isn't abandonment, it's survival. And choosing yourself after years of being invisible isn't selfish, it's sacred. So no, I didn't show up to her graduation. I didn't send the money. I didn't chase her down when she pushed me away. I showed up for myself. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. If you've ever been forced to set boundaries with someone you love, especially your own child, you're not alone. This story isn't about bitterness. It's about survival. It's about reclaiming your worth when love turns conditional. If this resonated with you, share your story in the comments. Let's talk about what it really means to love someone and let go. See you soon in the next story.